All right, today I'm gonna go over the 5 things that you need to know before you buy a small acreage near Calgary, Alberta. Follow along, I'm gonna put all the chapter notes and the 5 points in the description of the video below so you can jump ahead and jump back and forth if you need to. As always, my contact information is in the video description. But you know what, for today, let's just jump right into it. So first things first, we're gonna talk about zoning and land use bylaws. So one of the first things that I think that you should consider when you're looking at buying an acreage near Calgary, Alberta, is the land use and zoning rules. So you got to identify what types of things you're going to want to do on your property. Are you going to want to have chickens? Are you going to want to have dogs? Are you going to want to add accessory buildings? And in each of one of the counties, there's slight differences on how many of each type of animal you're actually allowed to have and what accessory buildings that you can build without certain permits. Just so you know, the 4 different counties surrounding Calgary, Alberta are Foothills County, Mountain View County, Bighorn County, and Rocky View County. And for example, where I live in Mountain View County, you need 3 acres in order to have any sort of animal unit or livestock. And chickens are actually considered a livestock. In the description of the video, I'm going to include the links to the land use bylaws to each of those 4 counties that I just mentioned. And instead of diving into each one of these counties and going through every minuscule detail of the land use, I'd love to get on a Zoom call with you and find out what your needs are when you're looking and thinking about buying an acreage, especially if you're first-time acreage owners, because it's super important that we lock down what your purpose is and what your desires are for a future property. And that way we can identify which one of the 4 counties near Calgary, Alberta would be the ideal place for you to buy a small acreage near Calgary, Alberta. The second thing that I want to talk about when buying an acreage is the availability of different types of services and utilities. Now, when you're in the country, you're not going to have access to city water and city sewer. So the couple different things there is most rural properties in Alberta are going to have a water well. There is a few properties where the well isn't producing high enough, or there isn't a well drilled. There is a cistern option, but for your water, again, that is going to be something that is going to be on your property, and that's a huge difference, well versus cistern, because there is costs to bringing that water into your cistern. The other major difference about being in the country is that you're not going to have city or town sewer. So you're going to actually have your own septic system that includes a septic tank and a treatment mound or a treatment field as well. So those are big things to think about. The other major difference is that your availability of your gas lines and everything like that out west of Calgary near Cochrane. Cochrane Lakes Gas Co-op is going to be the option because they have kind of a blanket easement for all the ditches. So that's going to be your gas provider. And then with electrical, you're going to have differences in older areas versus new, whether the lines are actually overhead or whether they're underground. And that's just going to make a difference on whether or not you see overhead power lines, which could be an aesthetic thing that you want to consider. Another thing that's different here rurally than in the city is how your mail arrives. So in the city, at the end of your block, in the community you live in, there's going to be a small set of Canada Post boxes that you can typically walk to. For you rurally, that's not going to be the case. So you don't have a mailing address, which is the same as your actual physical street address. So in the rural system, we use what's called PO boxes. So while we have a 911 or service address, which is our blue sign address, what you would think of as a street address in the city, we actually also have a post office box, and that is where all of our mail is delivered to. These post office boxes are located in different areas depending on how rural you are. Being in a rural community, we have a post office set of community boxes, which you'll see right about now. And then if you are actually a little bit further rural and a larger parcel, your PO box may actually be at a local town or local hamlet or local village's post office. So keep that in mind, that your box location is going to vary depending on where your actual rural address is. And so in order to do that, you actually have to go and apply for a post office box through Canada Post. It's not like in the city where when you buy a new house, the old owners leave you a set of keys and you just go to the mailbox. You actually have to apply for a brand new post office box, and it doesn't transfer with the sale of your home. The last service that's super different than when you live in the city is our garbage and recycling. So we don't have curbside pickup rurally, and you won't either. There is some private companies that we'll drop off a larger bin like you'd see at some shops and stuff, the big blue bins, double lids, that sort of thing, and they'll come every couple of weeks to pick it up, but that's a cost that you pay for. The other way that we deal with our garbage and recycling rurally, and this is the same across all the areas, is that there's a waste transfer site. So you're gonna have to drive a little bit, load up your garbage and recycling, and take it to somewhere in order to facilitate all that. And then we pay by weight for our garbage. So we drive across, so you'll drive across a weigh scale, they'll weigh you in and out, same as like the Calgary dump, and then you'll pay by weight. So that is not something that is included like the city of Calgary has included in their monthly utility fee. Behind me here, you can kind of just get an idea. So our waste transfer site out where we live is only open 2 days a week, afternoons and on a one weekend day. So you really have to plan out your week when you're dealing with garbage and recycling, and it doesn't just get picked up weekly like you would in the city. So the third thing that you need to be aware of before you buy an acreage is that certain services and their access is just going to be more difficult because you live in a rural setting. The three big ones to pay attention to are EMS, fire, and police. And the big thing there is because you are a distance from the more major centers, it's going to take time for those services to get to you. And then the limited numbers of the actual active units in those areas will also affect that. So instead of, a police hall being just a couple blocks away or in the neighboring community, as you would see in the city, we rely, where I am, on a police detachment that's 20 and 30 minutes away. So access to emergency services is going to be different. The other services that would be grouped into those areas would be daycare. You might have to drive a ways to daycare or arrange a daycare service that's on your way to work should you be commuting into the city. As your kids get older, schools will become a concern. And so in the rural areas, there's going to be one designated school that your kids are going to be allotted to go to. And that's generally going to be a public general education school. So if you are looking to go to a more religious-based school, say like a Catholic school or a Christian school, just know that you're going to have to then build that in and drive and commute yourself and your child to that school for that option. The other big thing would be, as your kids get older, is activities. So whether it's swimming lessons or playing sports, just know that you're going to have to commute a little bit further to get to some of those services because they're not readily available in the smaller, more rural settings. Now, with that being said, when they do join actual sports teams, a lot of those sports teams and leagues, as the kids get older, do start traveling in a larger area around rural Alberta. So some of the travel on weekends and stuff is going to be a lot further than if you were just playing inside of your city league as well. The other two services that are going to be a little bit further away if you choose to live rurally and buy an acreage would be groceries. And so for us, we commute again about a half an hour. And the great thing there, and I'll give you a hint, grocery pickup order. So we do all of our grocery shopping kind of online, submit it through, and then we kind of tee it in for another time when we're going into the city or dropping our daughter off for day home. And we'll just pick up our grocery pickup there. And that way it's not adding on an additional hour to our already, hour worth of driving to get the groceries. The other big one would be medical and dental services. So finding medical and dental offices that are closer to your rural home, and you're just gonna have to plan for these things. It's gonna take a little bit longer. You're gonna have to drive a little bit further to get to these basic services that would be super close to you in the city. And that's just a choice you're gonna have to make for you and your lifestyle to see if that works for you. Understanding that you're gonna have to commute a little bit further for some of the basic necessities in order to have the larger space and the larger lots and everything that just comes from living that rural acreage life. The fourth thing that I want to talk about is the different costs that could be associated with owning an acreage or buying an acreage near Calgary, Alberta. Now, one of the easy things to think about is house insurance and how is that going to be affected? Well, house insurance was actually a little bit more expensive than we had in the city, basically due to the fact that we are a little bit further away from the fire response, as mentioned earlier. The other thing that we noticed was fencing costs. Obviously you're gonna have a larger property with an acreage, and if you have dogs and young kids and you want to fence your property off, the longer you're fencing or the more you're fencing, the more that's gonna cost and everything else. Now, we did see some benefits in that our car insurance actually went down because we're no longer living in a populated center where there's so many drivers on the road that the actual risk of there being an accident goes down. So we actually noticed that we got a discount on our car insurance by moving out into the country. So just keep in mind there is going to be some different costs, different utility costs, or your internet depending on where you are, especially if you're in an area where you don't have access to anything but Starlink, and that's just kind of if you're in a really heavily treed area. Starlink is a little bit more expensive, and it's a more expensive monthly plan, and there's some extra sign-up charges in order to get the actual hardware for the system as well. So just the different costs is something that's super important, but again, get on a call and let's go over it. I did all this research when we moved out onto an acreage, and you know what? I'd love to be able to help you guys alleviate some of that stress and alleviate some of that research and help guide you through that process. Okay, and finally, the fifth and final thing is that I wish I would have done this sooner. So if you've gotten this far in the video, or if you even clicked on this video, that tells me that you're somebody that does want to live this lifestyle where you have more space, more freedom, the ability to grow your own food and maybe have some chickens or have a couple more dogs than you do in the city. And you know what? That's great. And I'd love to sit down with you and get on a Zoom call and go over all the different things that you would want to look for in an acreage near Calgary, Alberta, so that we can start narrowing down where around Calgary would be the perfect place for you and your family to start shopping. Now, all these different things do require a bit of research, and that's where I come in. I want you to be informed in every step of the way, and I want to be able to answer all of these questions for you. I spent hours researching this when I went to buy an acreage and have never stopped. And so what I want to be able to do for you is be that source of information. So if that sounds great, let's get connected and start shopping around and get you a beautiful acreage near Calgary, Alberta. My contact information is going to be in the description of the video below, and it's going to pop up on the screen right behind me. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out.